Lost in the New Mexico cold, the night two sisters saved a stranger. The evening air in New Mexico was sharp and cold, the kind of cold that bit at exposed skin and made even the simplest walk feel like a challenge. Snow had started falling in soft, quiet flakes, covering the streets in a smooth white blanket that glimmered under the dim glow of streetlights. In this quiet little town, evenings like this made everything seem slower, calmer, almost like the world had pressed a pause button to let the snow do its work. The streets were mostly empty, and the few people who were outside moved quickly, heads down, wrapped tightly in coats, scarves, and hats. Emma and Lila, two sisters who had grown up in this town, walked down one of the less traveled streets, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. Emma, the older sister at 25, had always been the responsible one. She walked with a careful pace, scanning their surroundings while occasionally brushing snow from her hair and coat. Lila, who was 22, walked beside her, more carefree. She enjoyed the winter nights, loved the quiet and the snow, and often let her imagination wander. Tonight she had been talking about a funny incident at a friend's house, laughing and nudging her sister as she spoke. The sisters were returning from visiting a friend who lived on the other side of town. It had been an ordinary evening, filled with laughter, tea, and simple conversations. Neither of them had expected anything unusual to happen on this calm winter night. But as they walked, the snow began to fall more steadily, and a light wind picked up, making their scarves whip slightly against their faces. The sound of the town seemed muffled by the snow, giving the streets an eerie quietness that made Emma instinctively glance around more often. She noticed the streetlights casting long, soft shadows across the snow, and the occasional tree branches bending under the weight of fresh snow. Lila, noticing her sister's growing tension, waved her hand dismissively. "Relax, Emma," she said with a grin, her breath visible in the cold air. "It's just snow. There's nothing to worry about. We've walked this street 100 times." She laughed lightly, trying to lift the mood. But even as she spoke, there was a hint of unease in the air, a feeling that made the night seem different from any other winter evening. The snow, which had at first been gentle, now fell more thickly, blanketing everything in a quiet hush that made even the smallest sounds seem louder. The crunch of their boots on the snow seemed to echo slightly, and every little noise, from the rustle of tree branches to the distant bark of a dog, felt amplified. As they walked further down the street, Emma noticed something that made her stop for a moment. There were faint footprints in the fresh snow, slightly deeper than the surrounding tracks, as if someone had walked hurriedly or unevenly. The pattern was irregular, and the way the snow had settled around the prints made it clear that the person who had made them had struggled through the cold. Emma's protective instincts kicked in. "Lila," she said quietly, pointing to the tracks. "Do you see that?" Lila looked down at the footprints. "Looks like someone's walking the same way we are," she said. "Maybe they're just heading home." Her voice carried a hint of curiosity. She took a step closer to the prints, brushing the fresh snow off her glove. "But these prints look strange. They're not straight. Someone must be struggling." Emma frowned, her mind racing. She had grown up in this town and knew the streets well, and these tracks didn't belong to any usual passer-by. They led from the deeper part of the neighborhood, an area that was quieter and less traveled, toward where the sisters were walking. The longer she stared, the more she felt an uneasy flutter in her chest. Something about the uneven spacing of the footprints, the way the snow had been disturbed, made her think that whoever had made them might be in trouble. Lila noticed the change in her sister's expression and felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from a sense of anticipation. "Do you think someone's lost?" she asked, her voice softening. Emma nodded. "It's possible, and if it is, we shouldn't just walk past them. The night is cold, and snow like this can be dangerous if someone isn't prepared." The sisters quickened their pace slightly, following the footprints cautiously. The snow was now falling steadily, and the cold wind made it difficult to hear anything beyond the sound of their own movements. Every step seemed heavier, as if the snow itself was trying to slow them down. Lila held onto her scarf tightly, feeling the icy sting of the wind on her cheeks. "Do you think we'll find them?" she asked. Emma's gaze remained fixed on the tracks. "I hope so, but we need to be careful." Her voice carried both concern and determination. She had always felt responsible for her sister, and now that sense of duty extended to anyone in need. As they continued, they noticed the faint outline of a figure in the distance, partially hidden by the falling snow. The figure seemed small, hunched over, and moving slowly. The sight made Lila's heart skip a beat. "Emma," she whispered, pointing. "Look over there." The figure turned slightly, revealing a pale face, lips blue from the cold, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The sisters exchanged a glance, their previous caution now replaced by urgency. Without thinking twice, they rushed toward the figure, snow crunching loudly beneath their boots. As they got closer, they realized it was a young man, probably in his mid-20s, shivering uncontrollably. His clothes were thin, inadequate for the winter night, and his shoes were wet and covered in snow. He looked around wildly, as if unsure where he was or how he had ended up there. Emma reached out quickly, offering her scarf and speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear us?" The young man's teeth chattered and his voice was barely audible. I'm lost," he said, his words trembling along with his body. I don't know where I am." Lila immediately took off her coat and wrapped it around his shoulders, while Emma pulled her scarf around his neck. The sisters could feel the cold radiating from him, the way his body shook uncontrollably despite their efforts. They exchanged a quick look, both understanding the seriousness of the situation. This was no ordinary walk in the snow. If they didn't act quickly, the young man could suffer from hypothermia, a real danger in nights like this. Emma gently took his hand, steadying him. "You're going to be okay," she said firmly. "We're going to help you. Come with us." The young man nodded weakly, too cold to speak more. Lila helped him take a few tentative steps, while Emma kept close, scanning the empty streets for any signs of further danger. The wind had picked up even more, and snow was now falling in thick, swirling patterns, reducing visibility and making the familiar streets seem unfamiliar and threatening. Yet despite the cold and the uncertainty, the sisters moved steadily, guiding the stranger with care and determination. As they walked, the young man finally whispered his name. "Daniel," he said. "My name is Daniel. I was hiking. I think I got lost. My phone had died." His voice was small, almost a sigh, and the sisters felt a surge of empathy. He was alone, cold, and scared. Exactly the kind of person who could have easily been left unnoticed in the vast winter night. Emma smiled gently at him. "Daniel, you're not alone anymore. We'll get you somewhere warm." Lila added, "Just keep walking with us. You're safe now." For the first time since he had been lost, Daniel's eyes showed a small glimmer of relief. The sisters' presence, their kindness, and their determination brought hope in the middle of the harsh New Mexico winter. The night was still young, but the storm was growing stronger. Snow whipped around them, and the cold seemed sharper with each passing minute. Yet in that moment, Emma and Lila felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. They didn't know exactly how the night would end, but they knew one thing for certain. They would not leave Daniel alone in the cold. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them together, guiding a stranger to safety in the quiet, snow-covered streets of their town. The crunch of boots on snow, the whisper of the wind through trees, and the soft falling snow created a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat, steady, urgent, alive. And in that heartbeat the three of them moved forward, a small trio against the cold night, unaware that this winter evening would become a story they would never forget. The cold wind blew stronger now, carrying with it tiny specks of snow that stung the sisters' faces. The streets were almost completely empty, and the soft glow from the streetlights barely cut through the thickening storm. Emma and Lila guided Daniel slowly, keeping him between them, their hands firmly holding onto his arms whenever he wavered. The young man's shivering was so intense that it was almost painful to watch, and the sisters knew they had to find warmth soon or risk him becoming dangerously cold. Daniel's teeth chattered uncontrollably as he tried to speak. I didn't think it would get this cold," he said, his voice trembling. I thought I could make it back before dark." His words were barely audible over the gusting wind, and the snowflakes stuck to his damp hair and eyelashes. He looked around desperately, as if the snow and darkness were closing in on him. Emma's heart tightened. "You're not going to be out here anymore, Daniel," she said firmly but kindly. "We'll get you someplace warm. Just keep walking with us. Don't worry about anything else." Lila gave him a small, reassuring smile. "We've got you. We won't let anything happen." Despite the cold, there was a warmth in the way they spoke, a sense of protection that made Daniel pause for a moment and take a deep breath, as if he were realizing for the first time that someone actually cared. The three of them continued through the quiet streets. Snow was piling up quickly, and the wind made their progress slow and exhausting. Every step was a struggle. Daniel's shoes were soaked through, and his socks were wet, making each movement painful. Lila noticed him limping slightly and quickly moved closer, offering her arm for support. "Lean on me, okay? We'll take it slow," she said gently. Daniel nodded gratefully, and the three of them moved together, the snow crunching under their boots and their breaths rising in visible puffs. Emma scanned the area constantly, making sure no danger was nearby. Even though the town was small and usually safe, the storm made familiar streets feel strange and unpredictable. Snow had begun covering any landmarks, making it easy to get disoriented, and the sisters knew that losing their way, even for a few minutes, could make the situation worse. As they walked, Daniel started to tell his story, his voice shaky but gradually gaining confidence as the sisters listened attentively. I wanted to hike alone," he said. "I needed to think, to clear my head. But I didn't check the weather properly. My phone died and I thought I knew the area well enough. I was wrong." He stopped for a moment, his lips quivering as he tried to control his shivering. "I got so lost, and then I started walking, hoping to find someone, anyone." Lila squeezed his arm gently. "It's okay now," she said. "You found us. You're safe. That's what matters." Emma nodded, adding, "And don't worry about the rest." Daniel looked at them, eyes wide and glistening with cold, but also with gratitude. For a brief moment, the fear in his expression softened, replaced by a quiet trust. The wind howled louder as they turned down a narrow street lined with small houses. Snow drifted across the road in thick, swirling patterns, making it difficult to see the path clearly. Every few steps, Daniel stumbled slightly, and Emma's hand was quick to steady him. Lila, keeping her scarf tight around her face, shined her weak flashlight on the ground, trying to make the path clearer. But the battery flickered, making shadows dance across the snow and creating an almost ghostly effect. "This storm, it's getting worse," Lila whispered, her voice low but concerned. "We should find shelter soon. We can't keep going like this for too long." Emma nodded, scanning the quiet houses. Most of the homes were dark, and the streets were empty. She knew the nearest place where they could be completely safe was their own home, a few miles away. The thought of navigating that distance in this storm made her stomach tighten, but she refused to panic. "We can do it," Emma said firmly. "We just have to stay together and take it slow. Keep close to each other, and we'll get there." Lila nodded, and Daniel, though trembling, followed their lead. The sisters' confidence seemed to give him courage, a lifeline in the cold, silent night. The snow was now coming down heavily, swirling in the wind and sticking to everything it touched. Trees along the street were bent under the weight, branches occasionally breaking and dropping small clumps of snow with soft thuds. The sisters moved carefully to avoid obstacles, guiding Daniel step by step. Despite their efforts, the cold was taking its toll. Daniel's lips were now almost purple, and his hands, even when wrapped in gloves and scarves, shook violently. Emma's mind raced. She knew that prolonged exposure to such cold could lead to serious consequences, but she also knew they couldn't turn back. "Daniel," she said softly but urgently, "we're almost there. Just a little further. Lean on me, okay?" Lila mirrored her words with encouragement. "You're doing great. Keep going, just a few more steps." The three of them struggled forward, every movement exhausting, but their determination was stronger than the storm. Emma and Lila's minds worked quickly, planning their path carefully to avoid the deepest snowdrifts and icy patches. The quiet of the night made every sound seem louder. The wind whistling, the snow crunching, Daniel's faint gasp as he struggled against the cold. It was intense, almost as if the night itself were testing their resolve. At one point, Daniel stumbled and nearly fell. Lila caught him quickly, wrapping her arms around him to steady him. "Careful," she said softly. "We've got you. You're safe." Emma helped lift him slightly, supporting his weight as they continued. The act of helping him made the sisters feel a mixture of fear and determination. They were scared, but they refused to let that fear paralyze them. As they pressed on, Daniel spoke again, his voice quieter this time.
I didn't think anyone would find me.
"I thought I'd be alone out here all night." There was a pause, and then he added, "Thank you for helping me." Emma and Lila exchanged a glance, feeling a warmth in their hearts despite the freezing night. Lila smiled faintly. "You're welcome, Daniel. That's what we're here for." Nobody should be alone in a night like this. The streets seemed endless, the storm relentless, but the sisters' determination never wavered. Slowly they reached a slightly wider street where the faint lights of houses could be seen in the distance. Emma knew this was the turning point. They were close to home, and Daniel's safety was nearly within reach. The sight of familiar rooftops and the warm glow of windows gave them a renewed sense of energy, pushing them forward even when their bodies were tired and numb from the cold. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only a long and challenging trek, they reached the street where their home stood. Snow had piled high around their driveway, but Emma quickly guided Daniel along a cleared path. Lila ran ahead to open the door, and Emma followed closely behind, helping Daniel inside as the warm air from the house hit them like a wave. Daniel's shivering began to subside slightly in the warmth. He sank onto a chair near the fireplace, trying to take in the sudden comfort of being out of the storm. The sisters quickly brought blankets, hot drinks, and dry clothes. Lila wrapped a warm blanket around him while Emma handed him a cup of steaming tea. The heat from the drink seeped into his hands, and for the first time since he had become lost, Daniel allowed himself to relax slightly. You saved me," he said quietly, eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Emma smiled softly. "You're safe now. That's what matters." Lila added, "Just take your time. We'll make sure you're okay." The sisters helped Daniel settle in, giving him space to recover while keeping a close eye on him. The wind and snow outside continued to howl, but inside the house there was warmth, safety, and an unexpected sense of calm. The night that had started with fear and uncertainty had transformed into a quiet moment of relief, connection. As Daniel sipped his tea, the sisters watched him carefully, feeling proud and relieved. They had faced the storm together, guided a stranger through the freezing night, and brought him to safety. The experience had been exhausting, frightening, and intense, but it had also shown them the power of kindness, courage, and determination. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside there was warmth, laughter, and a bond forming in the quiet comfort of a small home. The sisters had not only saved a stranger, they had created a moment of hope and humanity in a cold and uncertain world. The wind outside had grown even stronger, sending gusts of snow spinning against the windows and making the old house creak in protest. Emma and Lila could hear the storm's loud howling, and it made the warmth inside feel even more precious. But despite the heat and the comforting glow of the fireplace, the sisters knew the night was far from over. Daniel was still weak from exposure to the cold, and they needed to make sure he was completely safe and stable before the storm worsened or anything unexpected happened. Emma knelt beside Daniel, carefully checking his hands and feet. Even though they had given him warm blankets and dry clothes, his fingers and toes were still slightly bluish, a clear sign that the cold had taken its toll. "You're doing better," she said softly, trying to sound reassuring. "But we need to keep you moving a little so your blood starts flowing again. Don't worry, I'll be here the whole time." Daniel nodded weakly, his lips pressed together as he tried to shake off the lingering numbness. Lila placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "It's okay to take it slow," she said. "We're not going anywhere. We're here for you." The sisters moved quickly, bringing more blankets and warm tea from the kitchen. The aroma of the tea filled the room, and the warmth of the mug in Daniel's hand seemed to bring life back to his shivering body. He took small sips, trying to focus on the heat and the comfort rather than the fear he had felt outside. For a few moments there was silence, except for the soft crackling of the fire and the rhythmic patter of snow against the windows. But even inside, the storm had left its mark. The snow outside was falling in thick sheets now, and the wind made it nearly impossible to see beyond the edge of the yard. The sisters glanced out the window, realizing that Daniel would not have survived long in that weather if they hadn't found him when they did. The thought made Emma shiver slightly, not from the cold, but from the gravity of the situation. "For helping me," Daniel said quietly, his voice still shaky. He looked at them with wide, earnest eyes. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me. I thought I'd be alone out there forever." Lila smiled gently. "You're safe now. That's all that matters. We'll make sure you stay that way." Emma nodded in agreement. "Exactly. We're not leaving you alone tonight. We'll help you get through this." Even though Daniel was now inside, the sisters knew the night wasn't over. His body had been through hours of cold and exhaustion, and he needed more than just warmth. They had to help him regain strength, make sure he stayed hydrated, and monitor him for any signs of hypothermia or frostbite. Emma retrieved a small first aid kit from the shelf and began checking Daniel's hands and feet more carefully while Lila continued to offer him warm tea and soft reassurances. "Your fingers and toes were really cold," Emma explained gently. "We're going to do some simple exercises to get your circulation back. I'll guide you through it, okay?" Daniel nodded, too tired to argue. Lila held his hand to steady him as Emma guided him through slow movements of his fingers and toes, carefully making sure he didn't push himself too hard. The sisters worked together seamlessly, their concern and focus clear in every small action. As they tended to him, Daniel began to open up more about why he had ventured out alone. He spoke quietly, his voice soft but steady.
"I needed
"Some time to think. Things have been hard lately. Personal problems, family issues, feeling stuck. I thought a walk would clear my mind, but I wasn't prepared." There was a pause, and his eyes filled with quiet shame. "I didn't mean to scare anyone. I just wanted to be alone." Lila squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay, Daniel. We understand. Sometimes we all need a little space to think. But you didn't have to face that storm alone. We're glad you're here now," Emma added firmly. "And that's what counts. You're safe, and we'll make sure nothing bad happens tonight. That's all that matters." Despite the storm outside, there was a sense of calm in the room, a quiet relief that Daniel had survived the initial danger. But the sisters knew the night was still risky. The snowstorm could worsen, and the roads were almost impassable. They discussed briefly whether it was safe to call for help, but with the way the storm raged and the power flickering occasionally, they decided it was best to stay put for the night. The priority was keeping Daniel warm, hydrated, and calm. Emma brought a hot water bottle and carefully placed it near Daniel's feet while Lila adjusted his blankets. "This will help," she said. Daniel let out a soft sigh as warmth began to creep back into his frozen toes. The sisters shared a brief look of quiet satisfaction. They were making progress. Slowly but surely, Daniel's body began to regain strength, and the color in his face returned bit by bit. To keep Daniel's mind off the storm and the fear he had felt outside, Lila started a gentle conversation about lighter things. She asked him about his hobbies, his favorite movies, and small stories from his life. Daniel smiled faintly, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke about his love for painting and hiking in safer conditions. For a moment, the room was filled with soft laughter and conversation, a temporary escape from the harshness of the storm outside. But the sisters knew they couldn't let their guard down. Hypothermia could worsen silently, and exhaustion could set in at any moment. Emma checked Daniel's pulse and temperature periodically, noting every small improvement. Lila stayed close, offering comfort and encouragement with every sip of tea Daniel took. Together the sisters formed a protective circle around him, their attention unwavering, their care meticulous. Hours passed, and slowly the storm outside began to lessen. The wind still howled, and snow continued to fall, but the intensity had diminished. Daniel's shivering reduced significantly, and he was able to sit upright without wobbling. Emma and Lila exchanged quiet smiles. They had managed to help him through the most dangerous part of the night. But they also knew that the experience had left a mark on him, as well as on themselves. "It's going to be one I never forget," Daniel said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I felt so alone, so helpless, but you too saved me." I can't thank you enough." Lila reached over and patted his hand. "You don't have to thank us. You're safe, and that's all that matters. We're just glad we were in the right place at the right time." Emma nodded, adding, "Sometimes life puts us together in moments like this. It's a reminder that even strangers can make a huge difference in someone's life." The storm outside had slowed to a gentle snowfall, and the house was filled with the soft warmth of the fire. Daniel leaned back in his chair, finally able to relax completely for the first time in hours. Emma and Lila sat nearby, exhausted but relieved. They had faced a dangerous night, guided a lost stranger through freezing streets, and now watched him recover in the safety of their home. Despite the exhaustion, there was a sense of accomplishment and pride. The sisters had acted without hesitation, guided by instinct and compassion. They had faced the storm together, supporting Daniel every step of the way, and had proven that kindness and courage could triumph over fear and danger. For Daniel, the experience was transformative. He realized the importance of asking for help and the power of trusting strangers who genuinely care. As the night drew to a close, the three of them sat together quietly. The fire crackled softly, and the snow outside sparkled under the moonlight. Daniel's shivering had stopped entirely, and his body had regained warmth and energy. The sisters felt a deep sense of relief, knowing they had done everything possible to keep him safe. The night had been challenging, exhausting, and frightening, but it had also shown them the strength of human connection and the importance of helping others in need. Slowly, Daniel began to feel a sense of hope he hadn't felt in hours. He realized that even in the harshest conditions, people could show extraordinary kindness. Emma and Lila's courage and care had turned a night that could have ended in tragedy into one of safety, warmth, and humanity. For the sisters, the night had reaffirmed the value of compassion, determination, and the quiet bravery it sometimes takes to help someone in need. By the early hours of the morning, Daniel was stable, rested, and more confident. The storm outside had begun to ease completely, leaving behind a peaceful, snow-covered landscape. The sisters had guided him through the worst part of the night, and their efforts had created a safe, secure environment where he could recover fully. The wind outside had finally begun to calm, leaving only a gentle rustle as it moved through the snow-covered trees. The storm had slowed to a soft, quiet snowfall, and the world seemed almost peaceful. But inside the small house, warmth and comfort had replaced the fear and uncertainty of the night. Daniel sat near the fireplace, wrapped in layers of blankets, holding a steaming mug of tea that radiated warmth into his chilled hands. For the first time since the night began, he felt completely safe, almost as if the dangers of the storm had never existed. Emma and Lila moved around the room, quietly preparing more blankets and hot water. The fireplace glowed softly, casting a golden light on the wooden floors and walls, and the room was filled with a cozy warmth that contrasted sharply with the biting cold outside. Emma knelt beside Daniel, checking his hands and feet once more. "You're looking much better," she said softly. "Your fingers and toes are warm now and your color is back. That's a good sign." Daniel gave a small, grateful smile, still shivering slightly but much calmer than before. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You too. You saved my life tonight." Lila shook her head, brushing back a strand of hair from her face. "You don't need to repay us, Daniel. We were just in the right place at the right time. We're happy you're safe." Emma added, "Exactly. The important thing is that you're here, warm, and out of the storm. That's all that matters." Despite the warmth and safety, The sisters knew that Daniel had been through a traumatic experience. Hours in freezing temperatures could leave anyone physically and emotionally drained. They wanted to make sure he recovered fully, so Emma suggested some light movement exercises to help improve circulation and restore strength. Lila sat nearby, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. Daniel followed their instructions carefully, moving his arms and legs slowly at first, then gradually increasing motion as the warmth of the room helped him regain energy. As he moved, Daniel began to talk more openly. I didn't realize how much I had underestimated the cold, he said, voice quiet but steady. I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. I wasn't ready for the snow or the wind or being alone. Lila nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Sometimes we think we can handle things on our own, but no one should face danger completely alone, she said gently. It's okay to need help. What matters is that you accepted it when it came. Daniel looked at them, eyes glistening with emotion. You didn't hesitate at all. You just helped me, even though I was a complete stranger. I've never had anyone do that for me before. Emma's heart swelled at his words. Sometimes the right thing to do is simple, she said. You needed help, and we were there. That's all there is to it. Lila smiled warmly, adding, it's also a reminder that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can mean everything to someone who needs it. Daniel sipped his tea slowly, savoring the warmth and relief it brought, while Emma and Lila prepared some simple snacks to help him regain energy. The smell of warm bread and hot soup filled the room, making the house feel even cozier. Outside, the storm had reduced to a soft, peaceful snowfall, dusting the world in white and creating a quiet, serene atmosphere. Daniel began to share more about himself, his voice gaining confidence and calm as the warmth of the house allowed him to relax. He spoke about his love for hiking, his small apartment in the city, and the pressures he had been feeling in his personal life. Emma and Lila listened intently, offering gentle questions and encouragement, helping him feel understood and accepted. Slowly, the fear and isolation he had felt during the storm began to fade, replaced by a sense of connection and safety. Lila asked about Daniel's interests, and he described how painting had always been a source of comfort for him. I like capturing nature, he said. Mountains, forests, sunsets, they make me feel calm, even when life is difficult. Emma nodded, smiling. That's beautiful. Maybe one day you'll paint the snowy landscape outside tonight. It could be a memory of the night you found safety and kindness. Daniel smiled faintly at the thought, feeling a sense of hope he hadn't felt in hours. The sisters could see that he was beginning to relax fully. His shivering had stopped completely. His breathing was steady, and his eyes were brighter than before. They shared a quiet satisfaction. They had guided him through a dangerous night, and now he was safe and recovering. Yet they also knew that the emotional impact of the night might linger. Being lost in a storm, facing fear and cold, could leave anyone feeling vulnerable. To help him feel more comfortable, Emma suggested that they all sit together by the fireplace. It's been a long night, she said softly. Let's just sit and enjoy some calm. You can rest, and we can keep you company. Lila nodded, bringing an extra blanket to wrap around Daniel as he settled into a chair near the fire. The warmth of the flames and the soft golden light created a sense of peace that was almost magical. Daniel leaned back, letting out a deep sigh. I never expected tonight to turn out like this, he said. I thought it would be just another walk, but it became something I'll never forget. You too. You've changed my life in a single night. Lila smiled gently. Sometimes life surprises us that way, she said. The people we meet, the help we receive, it can change everything even when we least expect it. Emma nodded, and it reminds us that we're never truly alone. There's always someone willing to help, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. The sisters and Daniel spent the next few hours talking quietly, sharing stories about their lives, their families, and the town they all lived in. Daniel described his childhood, the places he had traveled, and the small joys that kept him going during difficult times. Emma and Lila shared stories of their own, laughter and smiles breaking through the tension of the night. The room was filled with a sense of connection, warmth, and trust, a stark contrast to the harsh, cold storm that had raged outside just hours before. At one point, Daniel admitted, I was so afraid tonight, I felt like I was disappearing into the storm, and no one would find me. But then you two appeared, and everything changed. I felt safe for the first time in hours. Lila reached over, gently touching his arm. You were never truly alone, Daniel. And even when you felt lost, you kept moving, hoping to find help. That hope brought you to us. Emma smiled, adding, and we're glad you did. That's the important part, finding safety, finding trust, and finding someone to care. The hours passed quickly yet peacefully. Daniel's body had warmed completely, his energy returning, and his mind slowly letting go of the fear and anxiety he had carried through the storm. Emma and Neil made sure he had plenty to drink and some light food to restore strength. They checked on him often, adjusting blankets, offering warmth, and keeping a watchful eye on his condition. Every small action was deliberate, showing care, compassion, and a sense of responsibility that reflected their strong bond and humanity. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through the snow-covered windows, Daniel was sitting comfortably by the fireplace, fully recovered from the storm. He looked at the sisters with deep gratitude. I don't think I'll ever forget tonight, he said softly. You saved me, not just from the cold, but from fear and loneliness too.
I'm so thankful. Emma and Lila smiled warmly, feeling a sense of quiet pride and relief.
Lila spoke gently. The important thing is that you're safe now. That's all that matters. The storm is over, and the night has passed. You made it through, and that's something to remember. Emma added, and remember that even in difficult moments, there's always hope. People care, and kindness can be found in unexpected places. Daniel's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude and relief. I'll never forget this night, he said. I'll always remember your kindness, your courage, and how you two didn't hesitate to help a stranger. You've shown me that even in the coldest, darkest nights, there's warmth and hope waiting to be found. As the morning light brightened the room, the snow outside sparkled, and the world seemed calm and serene. Inside the house, there was a profound sense of peace. The night had been long and difficult, but it had brought them together, creating connections and memories that would last a lifetime. Daniel had been saved from the storm, but he had also discovered something deeper: the power of human kindness, courage, and the quiet strength of people willing to help when it mattered most. Morning had finally arrived, painting the world in a soft golden light that reflected off the thick blanket of snow covering the town. The storm that had raged through the night was gone, leaving behind a quiet stillness and sparkling beauty. The trees were coated in snow. Rooftops glistened, and the roads, though snowy, seemed calm under the clear morning sky. Inside the small house, the atmosphere was peaceful. Daniel, fully recovered and rested, sat at the kitchen table sipping a warm drink, while Emma and Lila moved around quietly, preparing breakfast. Daniel looked around the house, noticing the small comforts that had made such a difference during the long, cold night. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the two sisters who had taken him in, helped him recover, and offered him warmth and safety when he needed it most. For hours he had been exhausted, shivering, and scared. But now those feelings had been replaced by hope, relief, and a deep appreciation for human kindness. I can't thank you enough, Daniel said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. I don't know what I would have done if I had stayed out there tonight. You saved me. You really saved me. Lila smiled gently. You don't need to thank us, she said softly. We were just glad we were in the right place at the right time. You needed help, and we were happy to provide it. Emma nodded in agreement. Exactly. The important thing is that you're safe and warm now. That's all that matters. As breakfast was prepared, a simple but warm meal of eggs, toast, and hot cocoa, Daniel spoke about his plans now that the storm had passed. He wanted to head home, back to the city, but he also felt a strong desire to express his gratitude in a meaningful way. He spoke about the lessons he had learned, about humility, kindness, and the way strangers could change a life in an instant. The sisters listened with quiet smiles, realizing that the night had affected all of them, leaving a lasting impact that went far beyond the immediate danger. Once breakfast was over, the three of them sat by the window, watching the soft sunlight glinting off the snow. The town was slowly waking up, and a few neighbors had begun to clear the roads and driveways, unaware of the night's dramatic events. Daniel glanced at the sisters, his voice gentle. "I'll never forget tonight. You didn't just save me from the storm. You reminded me that people care, even when we feel lost and alone. You showed me courage, kindness, and warmth that I'll carry with me forever." Lila's eyes glistened, and Emma reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That's what matters," Emma said softly. "We're glad you're okay, Daniel. That's the best thanks anyone could give." As the time came for Daniel to leave, he carefully stood, feeling stronger and more confident than he had in hours. The sisters helped him put on his coat, scarf, and boots, ensuring he was fully prepared for the cold walk to the main road. Though the storm had ended, the snow was still thick and the temperatures low. The morning light illuminated the tracks they would leave behind, a reminder of the night's journey and the path they had taken together. Daniel paused at the door, turning to face the sisters. "I promise I'll never forget this night," he said. "I'll carry your kindness with me, and I'll try to help others whenever I can. You've shown me that a small act of courage can make a huge difference in someone's life." Lila smiled warmly. "That's all we hope for. If you pass it on, then the night wasn't just about saving one person. It becomes something bigger, a chain of kindness." Emma nodded, adding, "Exactly. Remember, there's always hope, even in the darkest moments. Tonight is proof of that." As Daniel stepped outside into the soft morning light, the sisters watched him carefully, ensuring he was steady on his feet. He walked slowly but confidently, leaving a trail of footprints in the fresh snow. Every step seemed lighter than before, as if the warmth, care, and support of the sisters had given him new strength. The snow-covered town looked peaceful, almost magical, and Daniel paused for a moment to take it all in. The quiet streets, the sparkling rooftops, and the calm after the storm. The sisters stood together, hands tucked into their coats, watching him walk away.
"He's going to be okay?" Lila said softly, her voice filled with relief.
Emma nodded, her eyes following him as he disappeared down the street. "Yes," she said. "He's safe, and he has hope now. That's what matters." There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a shared understanding that the night had changed them all, leaving a sense of pride, warmth, and deep reflection.
After Daniel was out of sight, the sisters returned inside, cleaning up the small mess from the night and settling back into the quiet of their home.
The fireplace crackled softly, and the golden light from the morning sun illuminated the room. Lila poured herself a cup of tea, and Emma sat nearby, lost in thought. They reflected on the events of the night, the fear, the storm, the snow, and the intense cold, but also on the courage, determination, and compassion that had guided them through it all. "That was incredible," Lila said quietly, breaking the silence. "I can't believe how quickly everything changed. One moment we were walking home, and the next we were helping a stranger survive a storm. It feels unreal." Emma nodded. "It does," she said. "But it also shows how important it is to act even when you're unsure. Sometimes the smallest decisions, like noticing someone in need, can change a life completely." They sat in silence for a few moments, sipping their tea and watching the sun continue to rise. The quiet outside, the sparkling snow, and the calm after the storm created a sense of peace and reflection that was almost meditative. The night had been difficult and exhausting, but it had also been transformative. Daniel had survived the storm, and the sisters had discovered the strength of compassion, bravery, and human connection. As the morning went on, Daniel returned briefly, walking up the cleared path to the sisters' door. He held a small envelope in his hand, his expression serious but grateful. "I wanted to give you something," he said softly. "It's not much, but it's a small token of my thanks. And a promise I'll do my best to help others, just like you helped me tonight." Lila shook her head, smiling. "You don't need to do that, Daniel. Seeing you safe and strong is thanks enough." Emma added, "But we appreciate the gesture. Just remember what you learned tonight. The power of kindness and courage can travel farther than we ever imagine." Daniel smiled, placing the envelope gently on the counter before turning to leave. "I'll never forget this night," he said again. "You've changed my life, and I'll carry your kindness with me forever." With a final wave, he walked down the snow-covered street, disappearing into the morning light. The sisters watched him go, feeling a mix of pride, relief, and quiet joy. They returned inside, sitting together near the fireplace, reflecting on the extraordinary events of the night. They talked about the fear they had felt, the challenges of guiding someone through a snowstorm, and the emotional bond they had formed with Daniel in just a few hours. The night had tested them, but it had also strengthened them, leaving a lasting sense of fulfillment and humanity. Emma spoke softly. "You know, Lila, tonight reminded me that even in the coldest, darkest nights, there's warmth waiting to be found. People can surprise you with their courage and kindness." Lila nodded, smiling. "Yes, and sometimes the smallest actions, like noticing someone who's lost, can make the biggest difference." "That's what I'll remember about tonight." They sat together in silence for a while, sipping tea and watching the snow continue to glisten in the sunlight. The storm was over, the town was calm, and the world seemed full of quiet possibility. The night had been challenging, but it had also been a story of hope, courage, and compassion, a story they would carry with them forever. Finally, the sisters rose, ready to continue their day. They had faced the night together, saved a stranger, and discovered something profound about themselves and the world around them. As they looked out at the snow-covered streets, they knew that the events of the night had created lasting memories, lessons and bonds that would never fade. And in their hearts they felt a quiet joy and fulfillment, knowing that they had made a difference in someone's life, a difference that could ripple outward in ways they might never see, but would always feel. The story of that night, of a lost young man, two brave sisters, and a storm in New Mexico would stay with them forever. It was a story of fear and danger, but also of warmth, hope, and the quiet power of human kindness. And as the morning sun reflected off the snow, the sisters smiled, knowing that even in the coldest moments, light and courage could always be found.